In the middle of the forest, a terrified Joe runs for his life as a mysterious figure chases after him. Unfortunately, Joe trips and falls, allowing the creature to catch up to him. It turns out to be a vampire, who immediately starts drinking Joe's blood. At that moment, the sun comes out, and the vampire dies and turns to ash. However, Joe also burns his hand, meaning he's now a vampire. He starts moving by staying in the shadows of the trees and eventually finds a log pile. So he takes its blanket and covers himself, then runs into a nearby shed for protection. There, he throws up as the transformation reaches its end. Meanwhile, Stan wakes up in his lovely home and has breakfast with his parents. Suddenly, a glass falls, and his mother appears incredibly sick, and the house is in shambles. Then, his father grabs a gun and self-deletes in front of his son. At that moment, Stan wakes up, revealing his actual house isn't in a good state. His parents are dead, so he lives with his grandfather Ellis, a former soldier who always yells at him and expects to be called Serb at all hours. If Stan even tries to ignore him, Ellis pushes him against the wall to threaten him as he complains about youth today. As Stan leaves for school, it's shown that the shed belongs to Ellis' home. Stan is riding his bicycle when the gang that harasses him at school passes by, driving like maniacs to try to make him fall. Stan manages to dodge them, but the distraction causes him to crash into a police truck. Sheriff Dorney is very understanding, but the deputy is furious and reminds Stan he's turning 18 soon. This means there won't be any more juvie or second chances, and he'll finally be able to arrest Stan for good. At school, Stan's best friend Dahmer hears the gang talking badly about him, so he insults them. This causes Marble, Pitt, and Ozzy to get angry, and soon they're pushing each other in the corridor. Roxy and Stan immediately come to his defense, and Stan almost starts a fight, which is interrupted by a teacher who sends them to their classrooms. After class, Dahmer says that he's tired of this, and one day he'll finally snap and kill the gang. He also complains about Roxy, who used to be part of their friend group, but nowadays she prefers to hang out with the popular kids. Yet Stan still can't let go of his crush. Later at home, Stan hides in the attic to look at pictures of his parents while listening to emo music and playing with his knife. After cutting to forget, he throws the knife perfectly at a target. Then Ellis orders him to mow the lawn. When he goes outside, the dog starts barking at the shed, but Stan doesn't understand it's a warning and enters the shed anyway. As he looks for the lawnmower, he finds some teeth on the table. At that moment, Joe comes out of hiding and tries to attack him, causing Stan to accidentally open the window. The burning sunlight keeps Joe back, and Stan rushes out of the shed to get the dog, thinking he just saw a crackhead. Stan yells at Joe to come out, and when he doesn't, he sends the dog after him. As soon as it goes inside, the dog cries and violent sounds can be heard before its head is thrown out of the shed. A terrified Stan runs into the house to grab a knife, and Ellis comes to scold him. So Stan tells him about the dog and the intruder. Ellis calls for the dog to confirm it and goes out to confront the bad guy, not listening to Stan when he says they should call the cops. The old man is devastated to see his dog dead and gives his cane to Stan before entering the shed with a wood stick, ready to kill. After some minutes of silence, Ellis announces that the place is empty except for the dog's body, only to then start screaming. The violent noises can be heard again, and once they end, Ellis bursts through the door in a bad state. Stan tries to help him, but Joe drags Ellis back into the shed and closes the door to finish killing him. Freaking out, Stan uses the dog chain to lock the door as his grandfather's blood leaks under the wood. Then he runs back to the house and drinks Ellis beer, which usually he isn't allowed to do. He considers calling the police, but he's already on probation and thinks they'll blame him for this. So instead he drops the phone and starts working on properly sealing up the cabin so Joe can't escape and hurt others. That night, someone tries to open Stan's bedroom door. Thinking it may be Ellis, Stan leaves his room but finds nothing in the corridor. The power isn't working, and he hears Ellis whispering his name. He goes to check his grandfather's room and is startled by Ellis yelling his name behind him, but there's nobody around again. Now the whispers come from downstairs, so Stan follows them until he finds the shed glowing and the voice turning deeper. He gets ready to open the shed, and the voice yells that Stan wanted him dead before the boy wakes up in his room. The next day at school, Roxy tries to talk to Stan, only to be interrupted by Marble, who asks for help with his homework later. Roxy knows that Stan judges her for dating Marble considering his behavior, but she admits she's only doing it to survive the last year without being harassed. However, Stan thinks these decisions don't end with high school and will follow her all her life. Then he tries to confess what happened to Ellis, but they're interrupted by Dahmer, which annoys Stan, so he leaves alone. As Dahmer leaves the school, the gang starts insulting him again, and Dahmer gives them double fingers. Furious, the trio starts chasing him through the woods. At home, Stan notices the shed door shaking and grabs a bat before moving closer. Suddenly, Joe makes a hole in the door and grabs Stan by the neck, allowing him to see his monstrous face. The sun soon starts burning Joe's hands, so it's easy for Stan to free himself, and Joe goes back into hiding. At that moment, Dahmer arrives bleeding and yells at Stan for leaving him alone. Stan interrupts him to explain Ellis and his dog are dead, and that there's a monster in the shed. Dahmer doesn't believe him, and Stan agrees to show him, but first he grabs some things to block the door hole. Suddenly, Dahmer starts hearing his name, and when he comes closer, Joe appears at the door. Stan immediately rushes to cover the hole, and Dahmer helps him nail it down. Afterward, Dahmer gets excited because he thinks they can use the monster to kill the gang, but Stan thinks that's taking it too far and forbids him from committing any murders. That night, Stan goes to bed with a knife and watches an old vampire movie to learn their weaknesses. There's burning them with sunlight, destroying their black hearts, and decapitation. Suddenly, however, Stan wakes up from the nightmare. As he looks for his shoes, he peers under the bed and finds the vampire again, but this, too, turns out to be another nightmare. Annoyed, he tears the poster off the wall. Then he climbs on top of the shed and starts drilling holes in the roof, allowing sunlight to hurt Joe, but there's still enough shadow for him to hide. Afterward, Sheriff Dorney visits Stan to ask about Ellis. Stan claims Ellis is out, which Dorney finds suspicious since Ellis' car is still at the entrance. Stan swears he doesn't know where Ellis is, blaming it on the old man's drinking habits. Dorney explains that the family living up the road had all their rabbits killed, so the husband went looking for the culprit but never returned. When she shows Stan a picture of the missing man, he recognizes Joe but denies ever seeing him. Growing suspicious, Dorney insists on driving Stan to school, and while he gets ready, she notices Ellis' cane on the floor. At school, Roxy notices Stan's wounds, but their conversation is interrupted by Marble's crude comment. Furious, Stan defends Roxy, and Marble calls Herb sloppy seconds. Enraged, Stan starts punching Marble, hitting him repeatedly until a teacher pulls him back, announcing a meeting with Ellis. Since they couldn't reach Ellis by phone, they've sent Dorney to find him. Realizing Dorney is in danger, Stan runs out of school, unaware that Marble is following him. At Ellis' house, Dorney knocks on the door, but no one answers. Hearing a noise from the shed, she investigates. Something hits the door hard, followed by Ellis' voice asking for help. Dorney shoots the lock, but before she can open it, Stan arrives. Dorney points her gun at him as he tries to explain that it's Joe in the shed, not Ellis, but she doesn't believe him. She opens the door to save Ellis, only for Joe to attack her. He bites her neck, then rips off her arm before dragging her into the shed to feed on her. To make things worse, Marble suddenly shows up and starts beating up Stan. After a few punches, he pulls out brass knuckles to finish the job, but stops when he hears a gunshot. It's Dahmer, who fired Dorney's gun to make Marble surrender. Stan tries to calm Dahmer down, but Dahmer, clearly unhinged, threatens to hurt him if he interferes. Dahmer forces Marble to admit he's a coward before sending him into the shed. Stan's warnings are ignored again, and Marble walks toward the shed, but he becomes terrified when he sees Dorney's severed arm on the ground. Apologizing and taking the blame for all the bullying, Marble tries to back away, but Dahmer forces him into the shed, where the sounds of his brutal death are soon heard. Stan, furious, fights Dahmer for the gun. Dahmer knocks Stan out with it just as Marble's final scream fills the air. Moments later, Roxy wakes Stan up, but Dahmer and the shed door are gone. She starts panicking when she sees Dorney's arm, while Stan finds Marble's brass knuckles in the shed. In the shadows, they spot Marble's dead body, revealing that Dahmer is now a vampire. Dahmer explains that Joe is gone for now, but will return later to kill Stan. He monologues while approaching, unfazed by small rays of sunlight burning his skin. Roxy screams when she sees him, and Dahmer tries to attack Stan, who immediately stabs him with a stick and burns his arm in the sunlight before pushing him away. Stan closes the shed and hugs Roxy, only to be startled when Dahmer bursts out. Dahmer tries to apologize as the sunlight burns him to death. Stan rushes to cover him with a sheet, but it's too late. Then, Stan tells Roxy everything, and they prepare for the night. They put Dahmer's body in the shed, seal up every window and door in the house, start a fire in the fireplace, and make steaks from sticks while gathering all the knives they can find. Stan blames himself for the entire situation, but Roxy assures him it's not his fault. When night falls, Joe digs his way out from beneath the dirt in the forest and heads for the house. Meanwhile, Pitt and Ozzy knock on the door, demanding to know where Marble is. Roxy and Stan try to warn them to leave, but Pitt keeps arguing. A shadowy figure suddenly grabs Ozzy, pulling him onto the roof to feed on him as his blood pours out. Realizing the danger, Pitt is let inside. At that moment, Joe destroys the power box, but Stan believes they're safe since they've sealed all the doors, only to realize they forgot the attic. Hearing noises upstairs, they split up to check different rooms. Stan finds Ellis' gun, while Roxy nervously checks under the bed, but finds nothing. Meanwhile, Pitt finds an open window but doesn't notice the broken glass on the floor. When he turns around, vampirized Ozzy growls at him. At the same time, Roxy is attacked and taken to the attic. Stan rushes to help her, but is blocked by Ozzy and a vampirized Pitt. Scared, Stan locks himself in a room and searches for bullets while Pitt breaks down the door with an axe. Once the gun is loaded, Stan shoots both vampires in the mouth, killing them. In the attic, Joe is about to beat Roxy, but Stan interrupts. He shoots Joe, wounding his arm, but Joe is too fast and disarms him. Stan strikes Joe with an axe, only to be kicked away. As Joe chokes Stan, Roxy grabs the gun and shoots Joe, only wounding his face. With no bullets left, Joe prepares to attack Roxy, but Stan distracts him by throwing his knife, though Joe dodges, and the knife hits Roxy's shoulder instead. Joe tries choking Stan again, but Roxy retrieves the axe and decapitates Joe in one swift motion. With Joe finally dead, the couple gathers all the bodies in the shed and sets it on fire. The next morning, they wake up inside the car and realize they forgot to lock the trunk, where something inside begins to stir. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more videos.